So, welcome everybody. I am excited to do this episode. I am talking to an industry professional, Mr. Roland Mann. Now, if I'm not mistaken, you got your start with Marvel, correct?
No, that's
Okay.
not my start. I got
Okay.
my start in, and I always, I'm usually pretty quick to say thank you to the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles because the Turtles kind of were at the forefront of an independent boom in the 80s,
Yep.
right?
I
Turtles,
remember.
yep, they came out. I think 86 was when Turtles came out, and because of that, right? Because of the Turtles, of course, there were a lot of folks mimicking the Turtles and everything, but
Yeah.
independent comics were doing really well. So I actually got my start in '88 because of the independent boom with a little company called EF Graphics. Now they quickly went out of business, but what we did is we took that comic and we submitted it around to other publishers. And from there, we ended up, after EF Graphics, we ended up at Aircell. And now Aircell was a
Okay.
division of Malibu Comics.
I remember Malibu comics.
Yep.
I wasn't a big collector of Malibu, but I definitely remembered him.
Yep. So that's where I ended up doing a lot of my early work for Malibu,
Okay.
as a freelance writer from about '89 to about '92, and then Malibu hired me to be an editor, and so I moved to California. I grew up in Mississippi. I moved to California then to be an editor at Malibu,
Oh,
and
wow.
then it was just 2 years later that Marvel bought the company. So I became a Marvel editor through corporate purchase, through corporate buyout.
Okay. Well, hey, man. However you can get in. Is there any notable books that you've worked on that we might know, or the listeners might know from the past?
Generally not unless you're a comic book geek. I mean, a
Okay.
deep comic book geek. I mean, if
Okay.
you're like, oh well, I buy Marvel, I buy DC. Well, then you probably not. I worked on a book called The Exiles, which featured Juggernaut.
I am very
Uh,
familiar with the Exiles.
I was the editor for that.
Wow.
I edited a Nightman Gambit crossover, and I
Wow.
edited a Nightman Wolverine. So I worked on some characters that people know,
Right.
but probably not any books that, and like I said, unless they're deep geeks.
Right. The deep
Probably,
geek
yeah,
lore.
that's right, yeah. And you can find a lot of those books that I worked on. You can find those in the in the discount bins.
Right. Well, like most of the books from the '90s, actually,
That's right, yeah.
I actually, I was able to complete my X-Men, Jim Lee, Chris Claremont run in the $1 bin. There was a few, yeah, there
Really?
was a few issues I was missing, and I went into this comic book store in Northwest Florida, and they had a $1 bin, and all of them were in there. And I was like, "Oh my goodness!"
Wow.
I picked up every issue I was missing.
But isn't that a good feeling when you walk out and you've got a stack of comics like this and it's like $25,
Yes,
and you're
it was
like,
amazing.
man, that's I'm a big, anyone who's listened to me at any span of time knows that when I go to comic shows, that's one of the things that I do. I hit those discount bins. I'm looking for 50-cent books. I'm looking for dollar boxes.
Right.
Um, because I just, there's so much stuff that you can find that is generally, not always, but a lot of that stuff is good. It's just no one knows about it.
You're right. You are correct. There's a lot of comic books that I've picked up that I probably wouldn't have purchased otherwise. I just happened to be thumbing through the discount bin. I'm like, "Oh, this actually looks interesting." And I go home and I'm like, "I think I'm a fan now."
Well, and you're
So,
like, for 50 cents, man, I'll try that,
yeah. Yeah.
So
Definitely
I,
worth it.
I think it was I think it was Daytona where there was one of the Daytona. I love Daytona. It's a a lot of comic books there, but I think there was one guy at Daytona who had about 10 boxes of 10-cent books. Basically, you could get 10 comics for $1. And I'm like, oh my gosh! And of course, the thing about it is, you look at something, you're like, I don't know. But then did that little
It's
thing in
10
the back here?
cents.
It's 10 cents. Buy the comic, right?
Right. You're absolutely correct. That might have been my local comic book shop, actually. It might have been. I'm not sure. I'll have to ask him when I go to the comic book shop.
Sylvester?
Ooh, no, that's not it. Yeah, I thought it might have been him, but
yeah, I got his card. I owe him an email. And I think his name was Sylvester.
Okay, yeah, not
pretty sure,
not the guy. So okay, that's how you got into Marvel. So walk me back, because your story was very interesting. Because here's one of the reasons. I was not an avid reader. I hated books. I thought they were a waste of time. And when I read my first comic book, the floodgates were open.
Right.
I realized it wasn't that reading was the problem. It was the material I was reading that was the problem. And you had a similar story. So I'd like you to tell your story of how you got into comic books. Super interesting.
Very much so. Yeah. As a kid, I was, I was more interested in playing outside than, of course, when I was a kid, there was no, internet, no cable television,
right.
None of that. And it was often I'd come home from school and mom would say, go outside and play until I call you to come in,
Right.
And so I loved it. I loved playing outside. I loved being outside, and I did not like to read. I just did not like it. Right. And so I began to fall behind in school. And my mom, being the smart mom that she is, she was looking for ways to get me interested in reading. And there was just nothing, nothing really interested me to read. One day, and one of the things that I did throughout most of my life is I went grocery shopping with my mom. I was always her helper, and of course I was a little helper until I became, a senior in college, or senior in high school. Then I was the big helper. I was pushing the cart, getting stuff on the high shelves.
The hired labor.
That's right. And so we were in a grocery store one time when I spotted a comic book, and you know how kids are. Oh, I want it. My mom, all credit to her. She said at that spot, she said, I'll buy this for you on one condition. And I said, oh, anything, Mom, anything. She said, you have to read it and you have to tell me about what you read. Oh, of course, Mom, of course. Yeah. So she did.
Mom.
she bought the comic, and I read it, and I gobbled that thing up. It had these characters in these colorful costumes, and I'm like, I don't know who these people are, but this is so cool, And so I did. I told her about it, but it was continued, and so I was like, well, I need to know how it ends. What happens to this dude called Captain America? Right. I don't know how it ends. And so I'm like, Mom, can we get the next one? And she says, we'll get the next one, but it's on the same condition. I said, oh, of course, Mom, of course. Right. So we found the next one. And then there was another one that I spotted, Spider-Man, right? Ooh, that sounds cool. I don't know what that is. Right. Let me get Spider-Man. And so she bought the Spider-Man for me. And, within the span of about, 45 days, I was hooked. And my mom would literally, we would stop at a convenience store, and if the comic that I was looking for was not there, she would drive me to another convenience store to let me flip through the racks and look for those comics.
Nice.
And that's how I ended up getting hooked. And then the cool thing about the whole story is that I was toward the bottom of my class in reading at the beginning of the year. And then because of comic books, by the end of the year, I was close to the top of my class because I was gobbling comics up. And the thing the thing about that is, all right, so these comic books, they were talking about things that I had never heard of. Who's this H.G. Wells guy, right? I don't know who's Jules Verne. They say Jules Verne's right. This, they mention this, and and the characters mention it in the story. But it got me interested in like, well, I want to know what Jules Verne is, and or H.G. Wells. H.G. Wells was really kind of the first one that I moved to from comics as far as a book was. Of course, my mom was like, "Of course, I'll buy that for you,"
Absolutely.
And and it was the War of the Worlds, right?
Oh,
and I just gobbled that thing up. Oh my gosh, Martians have attacked, right? So cool. And then I was hooked on H.G. Wells, read The First Men in the Moon, and all that kind of stuff, and that's, and all of this happened in that same span of that year because, Mom said, I'll buy that for you on one condition. You have to tell me what it is. And so I absolutely, I give comics credit for making me the reader that I am today.
There are many people I have found that entered advanced fields because of comic books, and a lot of
Right.
people don't know that. Comic books are, in my humble opinion, the gateway drug to geekdom.
Listen,
it really is.
Preach on. I agree. I absolutely agree. Yeah, because you see all these cool things. I mean, you think, all right, so you just think about, this was before our time, right? But think about Dick Tracy, right?
Mm.
How many things are we using from Dick Tracy now?
I have on an Apple Watch.
There you go. So, you think, I don't remember when Dick Tracy was, I guess it was the 50s.
I think it might have been earlier than that, actually.
So, 40s, 50s, but you got to think, they were telling stories. These guys were making stuff up that someone somewhere said, I think I want to try to do that. I want to make me a Dick Tracy, Apple Watch thing that I can, and look, we're using it today.
Yeah, you are correct. They spark the innovation that came later from the readers they accumulated over the years. Who knows how many inventions came out of somebody reading a comic book?
I mean, confess it. You want, and you do, you want a Hobgoblin or a Green Goblin hoverboard.
I do.
I do too.
100%. I want a Batcave with every single solitary gadget he has ever had in his entire career. I want to be Batman. Tony Stark, if I could have the Mark II, I would be okay.
That's right.
Yeah. Yeah. I think your story is a great story because it points to two things. One, during the inception of comic books, this was seen as a kid's thing. And at one point, I can't remember the congressman's name. This was like early on, like I want to say the 50s. They thought that comic books was like warping the minds of kids. Now, look, there's some comic books that are they necessarily the most tasteful? Yeah. But that's with anything, right? That's with movies. That's with music, television. You can, go on and on. But comic books in general, I don't know when it happened. My guesstimation is, I would say late 70s, early 80s is when people realize, okay, these comic books aren't going anywhere.
Right.
Like this is a big deal.
Yeah. It might have been before that. It's funny that you mentioned, because you're talking about, because I teach this. This is one of the things I actually teach in my class. You're talking about the noted psychiatrist Frederick Wortham,
yes,
who did a book called Seduction of the Innocent.
Yes, he did.
And that book frightened American parents all over the place, so that they began to think that and Frederick Wortham's assertion was that if a kid read a comic book, it would turn them into a juvenile delinquent. And there's actually a video. Remind me, and I'll send you a link to this video.
Okay.
Where he makes it. It's just you watch it and you're like, holy crap! When you first start watching it, you're like, okay, this is a Twilight Zone episode because this is in black and white, right?
This can't be real.
This can't be real. But the more you watch it, you're like, oh my gosh, this is very real. And how scary is this? It's just propaganda, an anti-comic book,
Right.
And it's pretty wild that something like that actually existed and came pretty close to destroying the comic book industry. It did kill EC Comics. That's why EC Comics is not around anymore.
That is so crazy.
But it gave birth to the Code, which everyone knows. If you've seen comics in the back issue boxes, you got the little approved by the Comics Code Authority.
Right.
When I first became an editor, we still had newsstand distribution, and so I still had to submit the books that I edited to the Code, right, to get that little stamp so that we could put it on our comics. The Code doesn't exist anymore, and to me that's a little sad. But yeah, I mean, it came real close to destroying the comic book industry in the 1950s.
That is so crazy. Yes, yeah. And it's interesting that you're now teaching, hopefully, the next generation of comic book writers and storytellers and editors, because the industry, I don't know how much into this you want to get. I would rather talk about your company, but the industry is in dire straits.
It's in a mess, isn't it?
It is in dire straits.
Yeah,
And I think
it really is.
I think the primary reason, I think it was Dan Didio that he did an interview with John Delaraz, and one of the things he said was the people who are controlling the industry don't read the material. They don't collect. They don't care about it. They're just suits.
Yeah.
And look, I understand we need suits, right? Any business needs a suit. I get that. But
they need to be in the business office and not at the editorial chair.
There you go.
You know?
There you go.
Yeah.
And I think that's where a mistake is made.
Yeah, I think that's one of my chief complaints as well, is that when you look at, and I don't buy Marvel and DC today, so if you wanted to talk about anything that's happened at Marvel and DC comic books in the last 10 years, I'm not the person to talk to, because I'm no longer their target demographic, right?
Right.
But when I look at, and it makes me sad, because I have. Again, the Avengers and Spider-Man, those are my first two comics. That's what, taught me to read. So there's a lot of sentimentality for me wrapped up in those characters. And so when I look at what's going on at Marvel and at DC, it just makes me go, why? Why right. Isn't there not someone up there that says, hey, hello, maybe we shouldn't do this. Maybe this is not the smart thing to say. Or what I suspect is the case, the people who feel that way just keep their mouth shut because they don't want to lose their job.
That's probably
so it's like I see we're gonna do this thing over here, and I think that's a bad thing to do, but I'm not gonna lose my job over it, so I'm just gonna keep my mouth shut.
Hands off. Yeah.
I literally heard an editor, and if I could remember the name, I would not repeat it, just so you know. I was at a panel at a comic convention, and they were talking to this editor from DC Comics who had just gotten the gig, right?
Okay.
And someone in the audience asked, "Are you a fan of this character?" The editor said, "I'd never read a single comic book of this character before."
Oh my goodness!
Until they got the job. Now, I honestly, I got up and walked out of the panel at that point. I was with a friend. I said, "Okay, I'm done," and I got up and I walked out. But I think that's kind of indicative of the greater. No, not all of them. I mean, there's still some editors up there who, are again. I think they probably don't speak up too much. But I think that's indicative of the problem at the corporate comics, is that they're hiring people who don't know or care about what's gone on before. They don't care about the characters, and so they don't care. I don't care.
Right, and that's very unfortunate. I kind of feel like I'm not their target audience anymore. There are some comics I still collect. I'm a glutton for punishment, and every now and again I'll find a book and I'm like, okay, this is good. And that's how I know that book is going to end very soon, because it's good. It's like this won't be around for too long.
Yeah. So I want to be clear. I still spend a lot of money on comics, much to my wife's chagrin, right? I still spend a lot of money on comics, but where I spend my money is all on independent comics.
Yeah.
I've already said, I raid the cheap boxes. So that's and I do that pretty much any show that I go to.
Right.
But I back Kickstarters, I back Indiegogos, I back on my comics. I get comics. In fact, I just got, and I don't really want to plug it, and I'm not here to plug his comic, but I just got, the Bronze Star, which is by Mike Barron and Pat Broderick.
Yeah.
Right? So
Mike Barron, he is prolific, legend.
Yes, absolutely.
Super legend. And it's funny, this is another thing. Before I get into your comic book company, I'll just say this. It's funny how the industry is ostracizing legends. Yeah. What other industry does that?
I have no idea.
Imagine if the NBA said, we want no affiliation with Michael Jordan. People would be like, what? What? Are you serious?
Right, exactly.
Is this a thing? What are we talking about here? So
Crazy.
So you started this company right here, Silverline Comics, and I bought Cat and Mouse, which I haven't read the other 2 issues yet. I read number 1. I've been super busy, but man, I want to say this to you personally, and this is not blowing smoke. When I read that book, I felt like I was 13 again. I walked into the bodega, grabbed a comic book off the comic book rack, and I was like, oh, what is this? I was like, this feels like how comic books should feel. It was just a good story, a story that was good enough that I was like, I'm now interested in this character I do not know. Yeah. I want to know what happens next. Now I'm invested in this universe.
Very happy, sir. Thank you for saying that. I appreciate it.
Very good art, very good story. Yep. And as I said in my video covering your book, the problem I have with comic books today is I feel like they have the C team working on the front lines. And look, I'm not saying this to be disrespectful.
No,
everybody has to get their start somewhere, but you don't start a new guy on your main book. You give him this character that people aren't really too interested in.
Right.
Let's see if he can garner interest in that character.
That's right. And that's what Frank Miller did with Daredevil,
that's
right?
That's exactly what he did.
Yep.
That's exactly what he did.
And look what he became. But he wasn't somebody at the time, right?
Right.
But we all heard, as fans, we're like, hey, man, you should check out this Daredevil. Well, I don't read Daredevil. No, they got this new guy on there, and he's doing some really cool stuff.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. I'll check it out, right? That's the way it happened. I wasn't reading Daredevil before Frank Miller came along, but my friends were talking about, oh, you should check it out. I'm like, okay, cool. I'm going to check it out. Well, I started reading this stuff and go, holy crap, this is really good. I like this stuff, right? And then that's how you get hooked on Frank Miller. You get hooked on, and then of course, as a fan, you go back and say, well, I'm going to buy some back issues of Daredevil because I like Frank Miller. He's got me interested in the character.
Right.
Let me see. And I know it's not Frank Miller, but let me see what's come before him because I've become a fan, right?
That's what made me a fan of X-Men. X-Men to this day is officially my favorite superhero team. What got me interested, I walked into the store.
Jim Lee, right?
It was Jim Lee. I walked into the store. I saw that X-Men #1 cover and was immediately blown away. I was like, this art is talking. Like the art, I feel like the art is talking. Like, how is this possible?
Right.
And Chris Claremont's storytelling mixed with his art, Scott Williams on the ink. I was like, this is just like all-star team they've got on this. Like, this is just what's happening right now. But that, like you said, that made me go back and get back issues. Like, okay, I'm now invested. And look, I seriously felt like that when I read Cat and Mouse. I was like, okay, when I read these other 2 books, I'm going to have to order some more books because now I'm in.
Well, number 4, we just shipped it out to, I have a copy right over there, but I don't have a copy close enough to grab. Number 4 just shipped out to our Kickstarter backers. So
nice.
It is now complete.
Nice. So what was the impetus behind you starting Silverline Comics? Where did that story start?
So this goes back to the late 80s, actually. So what happened is I mentioned earlier that I'm from Mississippi. Well, when I first got started, I started doing little shows around my area. I went to New Orleans and did a show. I would go to like Jackson, Mississippi and do a show. I started doing shows, but I started meeting these other creators from Louisiana, from Alabama, from Mississippi, who were like me. They wanted to make comics, but I really didn't want to go to New York City.
Right.
I wanted to make comic books, but I didn't want to move to New York City. Now, back then, the idea was that if you would make comics, you kind of had to go to New York. That was pretty much the standard because that's where Marvel and DC were, and that was kind of pretty standard practice. But again, I mentioned the Turtles. When I got in, there was this independent boom, and so you had Eclipse, you had Kamiko, you had First. You had a lot of these independent comics that weren't based in New York City, and but I began to realize, there's a bunch of talented folks around me, and And I had already made my connections with Malibu, and so I'm like, well, this writer is pretty good, and here's this artist, and I bet I could help them. And so this is something I it took me years to discover about myself. A lot of people are just like, I'm gonna go do my thing. But I discovered that for me, I found out if someone wants to do comics, I want to help them in every way that I can.
Okay, you're a facilitator.
And so I think this is what was sort of the natural, pathway to being an editor. So what I started doing though is I started seeing these different creators, and I'm like, well, I could take this penciler guy and this writer guy, and we could come up with a comic project, and then I could send it to my connections at Malibu and say, hey, what do you guys think about this book, right? And they can say, oh no, we don't like that, and of course, okay, well, that was what about this one? And so I started packaging comics, right? Silverline became a packager. Now, my partner at the time was Stephen Butler. A good friend of mine who went on to do all kinds of things with Marvel and Archie and that kind of thing. But he and I, Stephen kind of handled the art side of it, and then I did the story and all the sort of the office stuff,
Right.
talking on the phone and that kind. And so that's what happened. As I started placing, and really it was kind of like, looking back on it, it was kind of like freelance editing and agenting at the same time, right? I was kind of an agent for them and trying to get their work placed at a publisher. And that experience, because we did, I don't know, 4, 5, 6 different miniseries, as Silverline as a packager.
Oh, wow.
And so that's when Malibu got ready to expand, they're like, hey, Roland, you already do this. Why don't you come over here and we'll pay you to do it? Okay, cool. I like that. I didn't really want to move to California, but I'm like, okay, this is an opportunity for me, right? That I couldn't see passing up. And so fast forward, Marvel buys a company. Marvel declares bankruptcy in '96. Marvel fires a whole bunch of people, me included. And so I'm like, well, you know what? I kind of know how to do this now, right? So back in the late '80s, I didn't really know how everything. I knew how to write a story and all that kind, and I knew kind of how to make a comic book, but I didn't really know what to do with it after that. It's like, okay, here's a comic book. Now what do I do?
Right.
Working at Malibu kind of taught me, okay, well, here's how you work with a printer. Here's how you work with distribution. Here's how you do these things. And so I said, well, I'll just do Silverline. I'll revamp Silverline and I'll become a publisher. And so from '97 to 2001, I published black and white comics in the independent market. I lost a lot of money.
Like any business venture.
A lot of money. And so I lost so much money. My wife said, you got to stop that. We can't afford to lose any money. And this is, for those who know, they know that the '90s was a horrible time for comics. The late '90s,
the great
early
comic
'90s
book crash. Ooh.
Yes, exactly, and it took so many people out, and so it was just bad timing on my part. So I stopped in 2001, and basically just swore off comic books. I said, I'm done. The industry is of course they was like, oh, the industry's collapsing, there won't be comic books in a year. Right. Of course we know that's not true, but I went back to school, I got a degree, and I started teaching, which is what I do today. But around 2009 or 10, I'd have to go back and look, I was doing research for one of my classes. I was teaching in my English comp class. I taught a book called Huckleberry Finn, and so I was doing some research on the book, trying to create tests for my classes so that they couldn't. I was trying to ask them questions that they couldn't go and easily find on the internet, right?
You got to read this book.
Right. So, and I stumbled across an ad from an Indian company. They were saying they were looking for someone to write a graphic novel adaptation of Huckleberry Finn. And I'm like, I've been teaching this book. I know this book. I can do that, right? And so literally I just threw off an email to them, said, here's who I am. Here's where, it's been a few years since I've been in the industry, but here's what I did. Here's what I do now. I could do this. And I got an email back the very next day, said, you're hired. And I'm like, well, that was easy.
Okay, here we go. Off to the races.
So I wrote a graphic novel adaptation of the Adventures of Huckleberry Finn. I had so much fun doing it.
Nice.
And I said, I remember the comics were fun. So I emailed them. I said, you got anything else? And they said, sure, here's a list. And they sent me a list of the books that they were wanting to do. And so I chose The Wizard of Oz. And I wrote a graphic novel adaptation of The Wizard of Oz.
Very nice.
And so that kind of rekindled I'm like, okay, I remember now. I do like comics. I just didn't like what happened there at the, in the late 90s. And I'm like, and Kickstarter, I just discovered Kickstarter. And so I'm like, well, maybe I can use Kickstarter and see what happens. And so it took me, if anyone who's made comics know that it can take you a while. So it took me a little while to put some stuff together. But I tried a Kickstarter in 2014, I think it was. It failed, but I learned so much, right? And I'm like, okay, cool. I know how to do this now, right? I know how to do this Kickstarter thing. And so I did another. It was about a year later, and I did another one. And this one did very well.
Nice.
And I'm like, cool, I like this. I can make comic books. And now we didn't make a lot of money, but it made enough that the artist got some money. We were able to pay for the printing, and I didn't lose money, which made my wife happy.
It's always a plus. It's always a plus.
So because of that, I reached out to Dean Zachary, the guy who did the first issue of Cat and Mouse there. And I said, hey, man, there's this Kickstarter stuff going on, and we can do this and we can do that. And so he and I came up with a project that we abandoned, but we came up with this storyline that we were working on, and he drew some pages, and he'd been working with Barb Kalberg, and so Barb inked it, and we hooked up with a guy from a former Malibu colorist, a guy by the name of Kevin Gallagly, and we started working on this book. And Dean got about 3, 4, 5 pages into it. He goes, so what about Cat and Mouse? And I was like, what about it? He goes, you should do that again. I said, I will, but I'm not ready for it yet, right? And so, but he kept on. He goes, well, we'll do Cat and Mouse, and I'll pencil it, and Barb can. We'll just take this team that's working on this project, and we'll just go do Cat and Mouse. And I'm like, I don't know, I'm not real sure about that. It's like, I knew that I had, because Cat and Mouse had a volume in the 80s. That was in the late 80s, early 90s. That was kind of my thing, right? It was in the top 10 black and whites for about half of the run. It ran for 18 issues. And so, it had a nice little run. And this is one of the things that, and I think Dean had heard me because I'd done a show or two with him, and people would come up and say, oh, hey, I enjoyed your book, but when are you going to bring back Cat and Mouse? When are you going to bring back Cat and Mouse? And so I think that's kind of what Dean heard. And finally he talked to me, he convinced me into doing it. But that's when we kind of decided, well, look, if we're going to do this, let's bring back Silverline, and we can use Kickstarter, we can use these new tools. Let's bring back Silverline. And they kind of had to convince me of that. And so Barb and Dean, and they're like, yeah, we'll help you. So Barb is actually our bookkeeper. She keeps all the books for us, and I like it because what happens is she keeps the books, and then she sends me a thing, and she says, like after a Kickstarter. So what we'll do on our Kickstarter, Kickstarter will say, here's the money that you got. Let's say, let's just say $3,000. They take their percentage, and I can't do math that quickly. So let's just say they take $250, right? And so Barb will, and so what we do, we take that money then, and then we print the comics, and we ship the comics, and then all the money that's left over goes to the creators, right?
Nice.
And so Barb is the one who I say, okay, Barb, here's how much it costs me to ship. Here's how much it costs me to print. I send her the receipts, right? And she does all the bookwork magic stuff and makes a report. And I send that to the creators so they can say, look, here's where the money, here's what came in, here's where the money went. Now here's your share of it, right?
Right.
And so I absolutely love that because I don't have to worry about that aspect of it.
Right.
And it provides transparency for the creators, because the last thing you don't want them saying, well, that Kickstarter made $3,000, but I'm only getting, $350. Why?
Yeah.
And then they'll look at me and think, oh, well, Roland, you're taking all the money. Well, no,
Right.
Barb does all the reports, so you can see where it goes, right?
Right.
And so I like that because it's full transparency. She does it all, and I don't have to worry about that. So yeah, that's kind of how and I kind of laughingly refer to it as Silverline 3.0, what we're in now.
Right.
But I was just counting up the books for an email I sent out yesterday. We've done 47 books in the last couple of years.
Wow.
Yeah, right.
Wow. For an independent comic
Yes.
creator, that's a big deal. And what's funny about you saying that is one of the things I think the mainstream content houses are suffering from right now is they're pushing out too much content.
Yeah.
Way too much content.
Well, and the thing about it is, here's what I've always said. They're doing a lot of things to the I think they call them legacy characters now, right? They do a lot of things to the legacy characters. And I don't care how much you love Batman. We don't need 10 Batman books.
No.
We don't. Give me one good Batman book, and then create something new. I am willing to try something new, right? Don't take Batman or Green Lantern or what. Don't change them just because you can't think of anything else.
Right.
Create something new. Look, I love comics. This is the kind of thing for years. Give me something new. I'll give it a shot. If it's not good, well, you'll know because it'll stop selling. Right.
Right. Absolutely.
But make something new. Don't just muck up all the early stuff. Create something new. Marvel used to be called the House of Ideas. They used to have ads called the House of. I think Marvel's the House of Rehash now.
Man, I was getting ready to say they are definitely not the House of Ideas now.
No, they're not.
So I picked up, again, I'm a glutton for punishment. They did a reboot of X-Men Days of Future Past. Okay, so I think it was Rob Liefeld that drew the cover. I should have known that the internal artwork was not going to be good.
Yeah,
the cover was great. The internal artwork was, no disrespect to the artist, he can draw, but he can't draw good enough to be on that book.
Right.
I was like, this is not the book. I have a weird way to judge certain books. This is how I judge X-Men. How does the artist draw Wolverine?
Yeah, no.
That's how I judge X-Men.
Yeah.
If Wolverine is not good, you've lost the plot.
Yep. And I agree with you. I think X-Men is, and I think you've got some titles, right? Like Marvel and DC both, but like for me, I would say your books that should have your superstars on it: X-Men, Spider-Man, the Avengers.
Absolutely.
Right? Those three should have whatever you in the company, whatever you think, hey, that's our best writer, that's our best artist, boom. These are the books that they need to be on, right?
Absolutely.
I don't need Jim Lee on Daredevil. I'm sure Jim Lee would do great on Daredevil. I want Jim Lee on X-Men, right? Give the younger guy, give the rookie Daredevil, because
absolutely
he's not your A-tier character. And I like Daredevil. Don't get me wrong, right?
No, but you're right.
I want to see your very best talent drawing the Avengers.
Yes,
because for me, that's my Marvel book, Avengers and Spider-Man, right? So put your top talent there, and then you filter it down. Those are your big books. Those are the books that everybody's looking at, right. and not X Mutants or Eternals. Nobody cares about them.
I do not understand why Marvel and DC both are content to shove these characters that nobody has ever cared about in our faces. Yeah. Look, they're characters. Maybe you'll get some young talent that'll make those characters interesting. Right. But as of right now, we don't care.
Right, exactly.
This is not the people I want to see. So what do you think is the future of Silverline Comics? Like, where do you see Silverline going moving forward?
Well, so I can't make the official announcement yet, so I'm giving you a little bit of a scoop.
Scoop here on the
So
thinking.
and I don't have. I am 98% certain it's going to happen.
Okay.
But I have been in communication with Diamond Comics the last several weeks, and I think we're going to see national distribution through Diamond Comics
I
starting
like it.
in February.
I
Thank you,
like
I
it,
appreciate
man.
it. Yeah,
I like it. I like to
we
see
have we have established the first book that we're going to come out with is a book that I wrote called Trumps, which
That's
is
the
not a
one
political comic.
right. That's the one I didn't
Yeah.
pick up, but that's probably the next one I'm going to buy though, because
Oh.
the art, that cover art that you showed me, I was like, okay, I think I might be sold just on this cover art alone.
Right. Yeah. There's been some good covers for that. It's not a political book. It's a science fiction superhero story, kind of roughly based on playing cards, right? Hearts and spades and
Right.
and you're right, that so on and
Like
so
the
forth.
different houses.
Yes, right. And that's the way the world is set up. Each of the suits is a kingdom, right? And so the kingdoms are at war. And you can only anybody plays cards that you know that you call trumps, right? And one suit is the trumps, and those are usually the catch cards, right? The cards that you use to catch the others. And so we're gonna lead with that book, and we have a again 98% certain. We have a release date of February 14th for
Man.
Trump's #1. So
Okay.
I'm very, very excited about that, and I think that will get us out to a whole new audience that does not even know we exist at the moment.
And I'm going to tell you what, this is where so I did a video, I want to say maybe 2 weeks ago, because I noticed a lot of comic book geeks are down in the dumps about, the major content houses pretty much being destroyed.
Right.
They are. It's unfortunate. But what I offer is this actually presents an opportunity. And I can almost guarantee your deal with Diamond probably came as a result of, hey, people don't care about Marvel and DC like that anymore.
Right.
Like they want something else. Marvel and DC have lost the plot.
And I don't wish ill on anyone. So don't mishear what I'm saying. But I am glad that this gives us the opportunity to do this, because
no doubt,
I believe in our product. I mean, clearly, I spend time, my own energy, my own efforts. I've spent a lot of time and energy, putting these, even the ones that I don't write, putting them together. And so I believe in the product that we have. And so it excites me that, because of circumstances, this could give us an opportunity to what I hope can fill a comic, maybe not a need, but a comic desire. Because I think
there's a void.
Thank you. Exactly, a void. That's a great word. Because I still think there are readers that are looking, like you said, you felt like you were that 13-year-old picking it up off the stands and going, what is this? And that's what I think we kind of have that opportunity now because of that, because people are fed up with Marvel and DC. And I'm hoping by getting us on the stands, there's going to be more people that say, what is this? What is Trump? What is Cat and Mouse? What is Kalis? I've never heard of this before.
Right.
I'm going to pick this up and look at it and hopefully come away with, some very, very pleasing thoughts about it.
And let me say, I agree with you. I want Marvel and DC to succeed for several reasons. One, this is part of the American mythos. Like we cannot let this die. Like this is part of the DNA of America.
Yeah.
Comic books, namely those two houses. And two, more comic books is better for everyone.
Oh yeah.
Because what happens when Silverline Comics is gaining traction and there's some editor at Marvel or DC going, what is happening? Who are these guys and why are they eating our lunch? And then they go frantically buy some books and like, yo, these stories are great. And let me say this. I would like to maybe at some point do a panel interview with you and some of the artists you have, because I will tell you, amongst the things that I was most impressed with, walking down that table and seeing some of that art, I was like, wow, there is still good artists out here.
Oh yeah.
Like there is still good artists. Not everybody has to be a rock star, but you remember in the 80s and 90s, comic book artists were just good. Some were better than others, but it, like, you picked up a book, you may not like the story. It may have been decent, maybe not your cup of tea, but it was good quality and the art was definitely pleasing.
Well, so I'll tell you I mean, I don't really have an official philosophy but I'll tell you kind of over time what I kind of figured out is that one of the things that I do, because I know that at my level, and we'll just keep using Jim Lee because he's such a superstar artist. I know that
my favorite artist of all time.
Right. But I know that at my level, what we're doing here, I'm not going to get Jim Lee to come draw a book. Right. It's just not going to happen. Okay. And I'm okay with that. What I remember from being an editor when I was hired at Malibu, and at Malibu, right? Malibu, before the kind of the meteoric rise, Malibu was the same way. It's like, we're not going to get Jim Lee to do it. We're not going to get these superstar artists to do it. But what we can do is we can get these guys that have potential. These guys that are young, still rough around the edges, right? Still, you look at it and you go, there's something a little off about this page. So I discovered one of the things that I have the ability to do is, and it's not it's not infallible, of course, but I have the ability to kind of look at an artist and say, you know what, you've got potential. And I will tell you this, most young artists simply need pages. And when I say that, what I mean is that a young artist, so if you go back and look at the early Todd McFarlane, right? Or even early Jim Lee. Jim Lee was not always I mean,
no.
You look at his early work and you go, ooh, that's Jim Lee, right?
Yeah.
So those pages have to be done first, right? And so I have kind of the mindset that I'm okay being that guy. I'm okay being that guy that says, you know what? You've got potential to be a rock star. Why don't you come do your early pages with me, right? We'll make some comics. You will get some experience and you will learn how this is done so that maybe you can do 4 issues with me. Maybe you can do 8 issues with me. And then you might be ready to take that next step. But most artists think they're ready, right? When they're like, oh, I just graduated art school. I'm ready to go draw, Batman. Yeah, no, you're not.
Yeah.
You're not. You got some chops, kid, right?
Right.
And there's a lot of things you do well, but you're not ready yet. You need to get some miles under your belt, And so for me, with the exception of the pros that I work with, like Barb is the longtime pro, my good friend Thomas Formonti, who inked Trumps, and I've known him for 30 years, right? He's a good friend of mine. So with the exception of folks like that, that's what I'm kind of looking for. I'm looking for and when I say young, I don't mean they have to be 19. You can have an artist who is 35, who's young, because they might have said, I always wanted to draw, but I just started, right? So I would call them a young artist, even though age-wise they might not be.
I definitely get what you're saying.
They're a rookie. They're essentially a rookie. And so that's what I find that I look for. I look for those folks that are in their rookie seasons, or actually even better than that. You know much about baseball, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so you know that when the professionals draft a player, they don't go to the minor leagues. They go to the minor leagues, right? And I'm okay with that. I am okay with that because I enjoy working with artists like that, to say, hey, let me tell some stories and let me help you, right? Get some pages under your belt so that you can work out the things that you have problems with. Now, the tough part comes when they don't realize that they have problems, right? When you get an artist that comes in and says, well, I'm ready for Batman right now.
He's a prima donna.
Like, yes.
Yeah.
And they exist, right? They exist.
Yeah. I'm great.
But,
just look at my art. I'm telling you I'm great.
Exactly. Right. Exactly. And you know, the thing about it is for a lot of them, it's like, you know what, you have the potential to be great. Yes. But you need to do some pages.
Right.
You need to show somebody that you can do the work.
Build your resume. Just
That's
like anything
exactly
else,
it.
build your resume.
Yep.
And you know, the benefit to you being independent is you have the luxury of finding hot new talent.
Right.
All the artists that we love now didn't start out as the artists that we love now.
That's
They
right.
were the hot new talent that just got picked up. Chris Claremont wasn't Chris Claremont when he wrote his first story.
That's right.
I can guarantee people are like, this is good, but there's some plot holes here. Like,
that's right.
What's going on?
So some dangling plots, right? It's
right.
like, well, how come you didn't finish that one?
Right. You did not tie this one up.
Right.
Yeah. And then they blossom into the Chris Claremont that probably wrote some of the best X-Men stories that you've ever read.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So I think that's a good benefit. It's the modern age. This is the thing I love about the modern age. And I believe I told you during that comic convention, me and my cousin, I used to draw. I haven't drawn anything in years.
Yeah.
I wouldn't even try to pick up the pencil now. But me and my cousin, we used to write stories. He still writes stories. If we had access to all that kids have access to now,
oh man,
we would have been able to start our own company right from the house.
Yeah.
With an iPad and a good story. Because
I'm assuming a lot of things here, but I'm remembering, you know, for me, my start is like, I didn't know how a lot of this was done.
I mean,
there was no internet to go to. I mean, there weren't really, you know, no one published a book. And you know, for me in the late 70s, early 80s, how to make comics, no one did that, you know? And so you just kind of had to figure it out. You had to, you had to be, I'm going to figure this out. And, you know, we talked about Mike Barron early. Mike Barron, when he started off, he wrote his scripts on, you know, those yellow legal pads. Yeah, that's how he wrote his scripts.
That's crazy.
He would draw a little thumbnail of the page, right? And the way I know this is because my roommate at the time, Stephen Butler, who was my partner in Silverline, Stephen Butler, one of his first gigs was to draw a badger, right? And so, but that was published by First Comics, written by Mike Barron. And when he got the script, I'm like, what the heck is that? Now, by this time, I already figured out I'm using a typewriter and everything, right? And I'm like, what the heck is that? He goes, that's the script they sent me. And I'm like, I've never seen it. And it was crazy. Literally, it was all handwritten. He was so I've heard Mike tell the story is that, I think it was Flash. He went from doing, you know, Nexus and Badger, and DC hired him. Right? And he submitted his script, and DC's like, what's this? He goes, that's my script. They're like, yeah, no, it's not.
Get a typewriter, buddy.
Yeah, they sent him copies of their scripts and said, this is what it needs to look like, right?
That's hilarious.
So, you know, but you think Mike did what? How many years of comics on a yellow legal pad? Because he just didn't know. Right? He just didn't know. So, but he made comics. He made it happen doing the only thing he knew to do, and that this is, hey, I'm just going to draw thumbnails and I'm going to write out the stuff on the side, right? And to some degree, I think that's what breeds a good comic book creator. That creator that just loves the art so much, he's just going to do it. He or she is just going to do it. Like, why are you doing it that way? Because I love it, and this is just the way I do it. That's why. That's right. Yeah. So, that's definitely that's definitely an interesting story, especially coming from somebody like Mike Barron. Like this dude is a legend. Like what? Yeah, it's funny because a few years ago I asked him. I said, "Mike, do you have any of those? Any of your old scripts left?" No, I don't have any of those anymore. So he's gotten rid of all of them. Crazy. I guess. That's crazy. He's now, if I'm not mistaken, he's now working with a
comic book creator that I've been reading, Eric July and the Ripperverse. I think I
Oh yeah,
mentioned him,
yeah.
mentioned him to you. And yeah, the rise of the independent content houses is so exciting because this is what I see happening. The same vigor and excitement that was there in the 80s and early 90s is returning, but it's shifted slightly. I don't
It's
think
not
so.
Marvel and DC.
And I don't think Marvel and DC will go away. I
No.
think independent content houses will rise, and that will force Marvel and DC to wake up out of this drunken stupor that they're in.
Yeah, I mean, and as fans of the industry, we can hope that that happens. I would love to see Marvel and DC, both of them, and it's been a while since I've checked, but at one point in time, they were doing like 120 books a month, right? I would love to see them pare that number back down to 60 or 80 titles, right?
Yeah, even less than that,
again,
personally.
well, yeah, but because again, you don't need multiple, Spider-Mans. I love Spider-Man. Don't get me wrong, but you don't need 5 Spider-Man titles.
Right.
Give me one really good Spider-Man. Okay, you can do Team Up, right? That's not technically, it's kind of a Spider-Man book, but you can still do Team Up.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, and who doesn't want to see those? But you pare them down. We don't need all of the extra stuff because it's gotten to the point where there's so much is that we just don't care. I don't think it will happen because I think it's viewed as money and market share rather than quality content.
Right.
It was like, how can we do more this month? Well, just do another Batman book. Oh, well,
and this is where a book like Cat and Mouse comes in. Like I know nothing about the history of Cat and Mouse, but when I read that book, I didn't need to.
Right.
And that's what was great. I don't like picking up a book and it's like, well, I need these other 50 books to understand what's happening here. That book, I picked it up, I started reading, and I was like, okay, I like this. I see the ninjas and I see the martial arts. I am really liking this now. This is really good. And it's that love. I think I told you, I could tell this book was made by people who love comic books. That is like the cherry on top of the cake. Like, this is a good storyline. And the thing is, I'm not expecting like the most dynamic storyline I've ever seen in my life.
Right.
But if I can pick up a book and go, yo, this was good. Like, this was good. Like, I want to come back because this was good. That's how you build into a dynamic storyline, getting people interested, building up the character, building up the lore, building up the universe. And I didn't know what I was going to think of the book, right? Because I left and I was like, all right, he gave me his spill. Let me see. All right, I'm going to read this book. And I found myself sitting in my studio, sitting on my couch over here. And I was like, yo, I think I'm hooked. Like, I really think I'm hooked.
Yes.
Like, I want to know what happens next. I'm now invested. Like, whenever this story arc is over, I'm going to be like, okay, so what's next now? What are they doing next? What's happening next? Where do they go from here?
I'll tell you a secret. We're already working. The first issue of the next arc is it's already penciled completely. And Jose Fuentes I think he's inked about 6 or 8, so about a third of the book is inked.
And that was the gentleman that was at the end of the table, correct?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
He is such a good artist.
Yes, he is.
He is such a good artist. I was like, wow.
And he's one of those, right? So Jose is one of those that he's a recent graduate from the Kubert School.
Okay.
Right? The Kubert School and this is
there in Jersey.
I met they're in Jersey. Now, the way I met Jose is because I was working with a guy who went to the Kubert School with Jose. And I said, well, hey, I need somebody to do this. He goes, well, hey, I've got a buddy, right, who went to the Kubert School. I said, well, sure, yeah, let me see his stuff. Jose sent me his stuff. Well, here's the deal. I don't know his age. I'm not going to ask him. He's not a young guy though. He's a dad. He's got 5 kids. One of them is at least 16 because he's driving. So he's a young guy, but he's young to comics. he's only been doing the comic work now for a couple of years, but Jose's going to be a rock star. Jose is
I agree.
He's just again, like a lot of artists, he needs to get some of that repetition. He needs to get some of those things under his belt.
Practice makes perfect.
That's exactly what it is. The Kubrick School is great. I love the Kubrick School. They make them do the work and they equip them. But one of the things that they have to do when they leave the Kubrick School is they have to go make comics. And I've been very fortunate with many of the ones that I worked from the Kubrick School. That's what they do. Many of them are like, yeah, I want to make comics. Come on, let's make some comics. And Jose falls right in that category. And I will quickly say I'm honored that he has chosen Silverline to be the company that he gets those pages done.
That's awesome.
He's an awesome person. I love Jose.
Yeah, I like his energy, and I like his. So you can tell that he took some cues from some of the comic pros of the past, and the reason I say that is when I saw his art, there's something I said in my mind. I said a lot of new artists do not know how to convey action on the page. And Jose knew how to do that. And I'm like, I don't think that's something you can teach. That's something that you teach a person how to draw, but this is something that they kind of got to pick up. And I was like, oh, I think this guy has it. I think he has it.
And again, that's one of those things that doing the work, because one of the things you can do is like, all right, so I remember the example, and I can't remember exactly what it was, but it might have been at a Jack Kirby page, but it's talking about, when you're going to draw action, right? If you're going to draw a pitcher pitching, right? You don't want to draw like right here, right? You want to draw the
follow through
all the way to the end and
have
those action lines there so you can see that, right? But so many artists will draw it like right here, and that's not like an exciting pose.
No.
The thing about it is, right, when you're a young guy, you might draw this, but you go back and look at it and you're like, man, I really should have drawn it this way. So you learn by doing, right? You learn by looking at your old work and say, okay, well, the next time I draw somebody pitching, I'm going to draw it, all the way through, and so you've got all that action, all that movement, as you said, right? All that movement instead of having somebody up here like this,
right? And it's funny because I remember it's kind of a shameless story, but me and my cousin, there's a library in East New York, Brooklyn, across the street from Cypress Hills Projects. Anybody who lives in Brooklyn, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. Me and him used to take turns checking out how to draw comics the Marvel way.
Oh, yeah.
Nobody else could check that book out because I would call him and be like, hey, cuz, I'm getting ready to check the book in. I'd check it in. He'd check it out. When he was done, he'd check it in and I would check it out. And that book kind of taught us some of those. That is the book, How to Draw Comics the Marvel Way. This is
how old mine is.
Wow.
It's falling apart. I bought this thing in probably 82, 81, 82.
I think even though some of the art obviously is slightly dated, I think that's probably a book every new comic book artist should definitely read, look through, take some cues from that, because I was young learning how to draw, and that book, without going to a school, helped me greatly.
Oh yeah.
And I can see how some of the key points in that book is maybe missed by some new artists. Yeah. Like, I think you guys might need some of the basic things that's in this book, because you skipped a few steps. You can draw, but you skipped a few steps.
Yeah.
So it was nice talking to him. And then there was another gentleman, forgive me, I can't remember everybody's name that I met. I talked to so many. Look, that comic convention was one of the smallest I've been to, but I probably had some of the most fruitful conversations I've ever had with different creators.
I am a huge fan of Daytona Beach Comic Con, because it's not a big one, but it's comics. It's all comics.
Yes.
There's all kind of comic book creators there. There's back issue comics. it's a comic book show. And so, I'm again, I'm honored that the Tom Ropp, the guy who puts the show on, he is a big supporter of independent comics, and he has been
I
a big
like it.
supporter of Silverline.
I like
We've
it.
been there. Oh, geez, I had to go back and look now. We've been there. He keeps inviting us, so we'll keep coming back. And I tell him, I said, here's the thing: we're bringing new books every year, and every year we meet like yourself. We meet new people who say I've never heard of you guys.
Yeah, which
It's like,
really and truly, I'm surprised, as plugged in as I was. And this, again, is a testament of the difference between information back then and information now. Like, I was surprised finding out some of the places you've worked. I was like, yo, I've never heard of Silverline. How have I never heard of Silverline? Like, I don't understand, because I used to. So I started comic book collecting. It's kind of crazy story. There was a gentleman down the block from us that he's an older gentleman, had a bunch of comic books that he just, I can't remember exactly how old he was, but he gave them to me. This is
man.
like 200 or something comic books, a lot of Conan
Wow.
books, some Spider-Man.
Merry Christmas.
I still have them. They still sit next to me to this day. That's what started me out.
Yeah.
And that plugged me into a world I didn't know existed, but I was so plugged in. I was going to the comic book shops. I would walk, I think it was like 13 blocks away. I'd walk. Didn't matter.
Wow.
I'd walk, beat feet 13 blocks to get that comic book shop. There was a corner store down the block from me that had comics. I said all that to say I was plugged in. Wizard magazine, all of that. I was plugged in. And I like the fact that now I meet you. I now, Lord willing, will post this video. Somebody else will say, Silverline. Never heard of these guys. Well, let me check this out. One of my subscribers actually bought one of your books. They just commented, I want to say 2 days ago. And I was like, oh, this is cool. I'm glad you found this company and bought some books. Yeah, I think word of mouth is the best form of advertisement. We live in a new day. Comic books, my encouragement to people who are kind of down and out about comic books, they're not going anywhere. Just like you, there's a lot of independent creators that are actually creating some pretty great comic books that people aren't aware are out there.
You're right. You're absolutely right. And I think that's what keeps me excited as well about comic books, because I look around at the independent comics and I'm like, I mean, there's a lot of noise, but there's a lot of good stuff, and it's like anything. If you're interested enough in it, you can wade through the noise to find the good stuff.
Yeah, that's a fact.
But it excites me because there's so much stuff to be found, and I think, kind of like you mentioned, that finding something. I think finding it sometimes is part of the fun, right? You're like, I've never heard of this. Let me try this. And you get home and you read it and I say, holy crap, this is really good. How did I not know this existed?
How did this go under the radar? What was happening? Where was my head at?
Right. Yeah. And as a fan, I love that,
Right. It brings back, like, of course, we're not going to bring back the 80s and 90s. That's not the point. But the point is to encapsulate that excitement. Yeah. That thrill, that enjoyment, that thing that sparks. Look, I'm a technician by trade. What got me interested in electronics? Comic books, Batman and his gadgets. That's literally what got me interested in electronics. That and a couple other things, but comic books played a huge role in that. Changed the course and trajectory of my life, reading comic books. So this is something that is near and dear to me. And I take comic books personal. Like this is something that this space means a lot. And I enjoy people like you that do this out of the enjoyment. Obviously you want to make money. I mean, nobody goes into business and, you got to make money. But I appreciate the fact that I could tell, like, okay, these are people who enjoy comic books. Yeah. They want other people to enjoy comic books. So they're focusing on the art form. Yeah. And that's what I enjoy.
I have said before, I would love to use this tag, but I can't because it is not 100% accurate in the sense of what it says. But I would love to. I came up with this thing. I said, Silverline, we put the fun back in funny books.
Ooh, I like that.
Think about it is, I look at some of our books, and some people say, well, Twilight Grimm, that's about a guy who hunts and kills vampires. That's not a
Not
funny
really
book,
a funny
is
book.
it? So, but yeah, I think that's exactly, what I want folks who read Silverline books to do. Is actually I said, what you said about reading Cat and Mouse made my heart happy, because that's what I want. I want someone to read the book and say, okay, you know what? I am interested enough in this. I want to see what happens next.
Right.
Because, what more really can you ask as someone who creates a book than to create a desire for more of that? It means that you liked it enough. It might not beat out your favorite Chris Claremont X-Men, but it doesn't have to, right?
No, right. It's another
has
space.
To bring right.
Right.
It has to bring enjoyment to you. And if it brings enough enjoyment to you that you say, I'd like to see what happens next, I would like to see the next issue, then for me, that's a success. And that's what I want readers who pick up Silverline books to get.
But here's my prediction. I'm no prophet, but I think companies like yours and books like, for me personally, Cat and Mouse, and I'm going to get Trumps as well. I think with enough excitement, this is what I see. People picking up the book, getting excited, you getting this information that, hey, people are really excited about this. I think that excites you to create even more dynamic stories. That excites the artists to go even harder. Like, okay, this one, we're going all out, splash panels everywhere. We're doing this up. That builds that buzz. And then we're left asking, yo, where did these dudes come from? Like, they came out of nowhere. Now this comic is like, this thing is great. Like, how did this happen? I think that the comic book industry is a two-sided coin. The creators and the readers are like, they work hand in hand. There's like a delicate dance going on.
Yeah. And I don't know. See, I don't think we had anything in number one. I was going to show you something because I was going to try. Oh yeah, here we go. Let me try this right here. So what I would like to do, I would like to encourage you and anyone else who might be listening right now. One of the best ways to get our back issues is through our Kickstarter. So it does a couple of things for us. We list all of every book that we've done is available on our Kickstarter, right? So you could back the Kickstarter, and then you say, well, look, I need, Cat and Mouse 2, 3, and 4, right? Or whatever. Or I'm going to get Trumps 1, 2, 3, and 4. You can do that on the Kickstarter. That's the very best way, because it helps us with our Kickstarters as well, right? One of the things that our Kickstarters do. Hold on, actually, I'm going to get this is actually Cat and Mouse 4.
Oh, I like that cover.
Yeah. So what we do is, for our Kickstarters, we have we make these exclusive foil covers, and the only way you can get these covers is through the Kickstarter.
Oh.
So if anyone is out there, oh man, I'd like to have one of those. Well, they're not available anymore. This one is not available anymore, right? Because our Cat and Mouse number 4 Kickstarter is done. The only way you can get this book now is to convince someone who backed the Kickstarter to sell their copy to you, right? And so what I would encourage you or anyone who's like, well, I'd kind of like to have Trumps. Well, check out our Kickstarter now. It ends this Sunday, and look to see, well, because right now we have it's Cray number 2, drawn by Stephen Butler, who was my old college roommate, and Switchblade number 3. So you can get both of them, or you can get one of them. You can even, if you're like, well, I don't really want to get, because I'd have to go look. I want to say the foil covers are $18. And you're like, well,
that's not bad.
I don't really want to. I don't think so either. But some people are like, I don't really want to spend $18 on a foil. You can get the regular versions, right? You can get them as well. And then you can still you can't get a digital version and get physical back issues. Kickstarter is not built that way. What you can't do that. So you have to get a physical You have to get a physical reward. I'm like, give me 2 seconds.
Okay,
I'm gonna
go ahead.
I gotta show you these new covers.
Go ahead.
Because they are awesome.
Take all the time you need. That's what we're here for. This is awesome, guys. I love, as you can see,
I didn't have
I'm
to go
a
far to
huge
get them.
fan of comic books, and I love indie comics as well. So this is definitely great.
One of my things fell off. I'm listening in mono now.
Those look like professional earbuds.
Well, these are really nice. These were a Christmas gift from my daughter, I think 2 years ago. Oh my gosh, these are nice.
They look like actual monitors, is what they look like.
I don't know, to be honest with you, but they're very good. I like them. So these are the two books that were Kickstarter. I know, right?
That book looks good.
So this is actually a cover by Stephen Butler.
Wow.
Right? So this is Cray number 2.
That cover is amazing.
And then the other one is Switchblade number 3.
Okay.
Right. But yeah, this is
that's a great cover. Wow.
Yeah. So again, you can say, hey, I kind of like to have this cover. You can go back to Kickstarter, get this cover, and you can say, while I'm at it, I'm going to get Trumps 1, 2, 3, and 4.
I might do that. I might just do that.
And what it does is it helps us with our Kickstarter. It helps us, and because right now what we do is everything that we do is funded through our Kickstarters. And so, we depend on those to help make us a little bit of money so that we can keep going. The artists, if I can send them, like I said, oh, look, we made some money on the Kickstarter. Here's some money,
Right.
It helps to keep, like you said, we do this. Most of us are doing this because we love it.
Right.
Right. But if we can make a little money, if we can make a little money while we're going, then it helps. And so buying back issues from us via the Kickstarters is probably the way I would encourage anyone. Or you see us at a show, obviously,
right?
But when you don't see us at a show, what can you do? Well, back our Kickstarter and then go through the list.
Like I said, we got
heard it here. 47 books.
Yeah, and look, I like that cover you just showed. I'm pretty sure I'm going to buy that. That looks really good.
Isn't it sweet? I'll show it to you again.
I was like, that's a great cover, and it's such good art. I miss the days where the art made you buy the book.
Right.
I miss those days. That is something that I think is missing from some of the new comic books. That's how, look, I told my son asked me one time about how I pick comic books. And I say, my method is unorthodox. If the cover art doesn't grab me, I'm not picking up the book.
Absolutely.
Bottom line.
Absolutely.
That cover art better be good. Sometimes I've picked up a book where the cover art wasn't the greatest and was shocked.
Yeah.
Typically, if the cover art is good, and this is not always true, I've been duped. But typically, if the cover art is good, it's probably going to be some good interior work. Probably.
Well, so let me tell you something else that we decided a little while back that we were going to start doing, and I have noticed actually a difference at shows.
Okay.
It's a subtle thing, right? But so if you look at this cover, right, and you look at this cover. And then you even look at the cat and mouse cover, right? So, and I just want you to kind of look at them, right?
Right.
Now, there's something on them that most comics don't do today. Now, I love Mike Barron and I love Pat Broderick, but I'm going to hold this up as an example. They don't have it. Actually, let me take this out. There's too much of a glow on that.
Yeah.
This cover does not have it. And one of the things that's part of what we do is still shiny, isn't it?
It is still shiny, but I can see, and I think I see what you're saying.
What is it?
You had those I can't remember what they call them, like panel announcements. I think that's what they call it. Yeah, on the front of the book.
It's just words. We put some words on it. It's like, look, you can look at this, and of course this one, because it's foil, is a little bit hard to read. But
but it makes a difference.
He would defeat every last one of them.
It makes a difference
for her.
It makes a difference. Yeah.
So you look at it and your eyes are taking in the artwork, but you also read that. And so it gives you some context,
It's a
right?
brief synopsis. So you're like,
It,
oh,
it
okay.
Yes, right.
Huh.
It's this thing. Denny O'Neil called it. Denny O'Neil wrote a really good book on comic book writing. Of course, you should know who Denny O'Neil is, right? Because of Batman, right? So he wrote this really good book on comic book writing in which he talked about the hook. And one of the things that he said is a lot of comics today, because he wrote it later in his life. So one of the problems with a lot of comics today is they don't have that hook. And I think, if you, again, I love Mike Baron, I love Pat Broderick, but if you look at this is called Bronze Star, and there's a dude shooting a gun.
But you don't really have any idea. Okay, so what's going on?
It's a cowboy book. Okay,
right.
Well, what's,
right.
Again,
pull me in.
Clearly, I bought it. Right. So
it's Mike Baron, so you know it's going to be good.
It's Mike Baron.
Right.
But, for someone who doesn't know Mike Baron or Pat Broderick, they're going to look at this and, there's nothing on there like this one here, right? Only one of us is walking away from this fight, Switchblade, and that's going to be me. So
you're like, okay, right? There's some animosity going on between these two, and there's some kind of big battle. I need to see what happens.
So, there's a little context there, and we started doing this about, I want to say about 2 years ago. And I have noticed that people, when they look at the books, they ask different questions, right? So without it, they're like, so what's this book about, right? What's this book about? And with it, they have some context. They start asking, why is this guy so mad at him, right? Why are these guys fighting, Who is she to him?
Those are questions that will make you buy the book.
Right. And so what's this book about? Well, it's about a barbarian dude who's fighting for a girl, right? Well, I give you that right there, right?
Right.
So they start asking different questions. And so I had a couple of creators that I worked with. They're like, I don't really want words on my comics. I said, well, we're doing words on the comics because at Silverline, this is what we want to do. We want to, and you go around, I challenge you to go around at the next show that you're out and look at the new comics, right? Now not the old stuff, because the old stuff had them, right? Your old Spider-Mans, those old X-Men's, those had them, right? But you look at the new comics today, and the overwhelming majority of them do not have that.
And I wonder when that started. I wonder if it was during, because I can't remember if Image Comics did it, because Image Comics affected the industry in that a lot of content houses followed what they did.
Yep.
Like if Rob Liefeld was doing pouches and guns, everybody was doing pouches and guns, right? Like if Jim Lee had a big guy in all his teams, everybody had a big guy in all their teams. So there was no more originality.
So I don't know if you happened to see this one when you were browsing through.
I did.
But one of the things that we did is that we poked a little fun and had a bit of a little homage to
I see it.
Pouches.
I see it. I like it.
So
that is
clearly that's not his costume,
right?
And part of his story is, and this is part of what he does. And then he goes into a fight with that on there. But,
so you know what I noticed about your comic books as well? I think people like, and I don't know if this is something intentional. I'm going to assume it is at this point. There's too many lines in some comic book interiors. Like so many lines that there's no delineation between items. Yeah. And when I opened up Cat and Mouse, immediately that's what caught my eye is, my depth of field is a lot better in this comic book because there's not so many lines that I can't tell what's what.
Right.
Where's this item at in relation to this other person? Well, I know because there's not a million lines, blocking my field of view. Those little subtle things I noticed when I picked it up. I was like, I like this.
Oh yeah, it's absolutely intentional. I believe that the industry is experiencing, and I hope it doesn't happen, but we are absolutely moving, and we've been doing it for several years, moving into a direction where we're losing the craft of inking. Okay, now the guy who inked this, I mentioned him earlier, is a longtime friend of mine, Thomas Formonti. He's been inking for 30 years. The inker for Cat and Mouse, she's been inking for 30 years. She's a longtime inker. Jose, right? Jose he's a young, super talented inker. But unfortunately, I think if you look at a lot of comic books today, and you start to dissect it some, the craft of inking is beginning to be lost because a lot of creators are overcompensating with what the colorists can do now, because it's all done on the computer. So they're like, and the problem is, and you hit the nail on the head, the problem is when you do that, you begin to lose some of that depth.
You do,
right? And there's nothing I can do this is always going to be 2D, right? There's nothing I can do to ever change that. But it is the artist's goal to give you the illusion of depth, so that when you look at this page, you think, oh, I could reach my hand in there and grab that, right?
Yes.
It's the illusion of depth. And the problem is, as I think, all right, so I look at this, right? Just this panel right here with these guns. Like I said, so this thing is in the foreground and this is in the foreground, and look at how dark those are, right? So they're inked thick, and then of course this Joker over here, point to him, right? He's next, right? And then these guys are kind of in the midground,
right?
And then you've got the background. Everything is thinner. All those lines are thinner. That's just an inker knowing what he's doing. Right. He's giving you these thick lines up close to you, right? And then they're not quite as thick in the midground, and then they're really thin in the background.
Right.
That's the way your eye looks at it. This is still a piece of paper, right?
Right.
But your eye looks at it and interprets depth in there. And I think, unfortunately, as an industry, we're kind of losing that. And I hate to see that. It's not gone.
No.
Right, but I think I look at Marvel and DC comics. I flip through them when I'm there. I don't buy them, but I flip through them to look at them, right? And I'm like, man, this is crap. Why this inker doesn't know how to ink? Why did they hire this person?
Yeah, the page is stuffed. There's too many. There's too many lines. You can't. There's no delineation between what's going on. Yeah. And there's some artists who can pull that off, and it works for them because they have, like Jock. Jock has a quirky art style that I love. I actually like the way he does stuff, because it's like he did, what is that Batman series? I have the book around here somewhere that he did.
I'm not familiar with that artist.
I think he's Irish. I think he's Irish or British. I think he might be Scottish. I might have that all mixed. Anyway. Right. His art is
one of those islands over there.
One of those islands. His art is kind of, it's dark, so it fits Batman, and there's a delineation, but the lines kind of mesh, but it fits the dark world of Gotham City. Yeah. So for a book like that, you can get away with that. And I think what some artists haven't realized is every book has a personality. You cannot draw Spider-Man like you draw Batman. That absolutely will not work.
Nope.
It will not look the same. You will not like what you're looking at.
Yeah. And see, I look at that poster just over your shoulder of Spider-Man, and I see that, Spider-Man is clearly red and blue. Okay. I picked up a Spider-Man. I was thumbing through a Spider-Man book the other day, and I was looking at it. And I'm like, this is not red and blue. This is like really dark blood colored red,
right. Like, and what is this?
Blue, like, super dark, like, maybe even like a Nightcrawler. But I don't remember. It was just a lot darker. I'm like, that's not Spider-Man's costume. That's too dark. Where's red and blue?
Right.
It's like, and that's a problem I have. It's like they're afraid of the primary colors anymore.
There's subtle things, and that's what I think. That's what captured the nostalgia in Cat and Mouse. Is there's subtle things. It's almost like going back to analog to some degree, while maintaining your presence in a digital era.
Right.
Like I'm an audiophile, right? Like audio is my thing. I'm
cool.
It's just something I love. A good tube amplifier like that warmth that it adds to your vocals. Like you
Yeah.
can't do that with digital. No matter how hard you try. And there's
Yeah.
there's some good sound engineers that can get really close to make
Yeah.
you think that they were using a tube, but there's something in that warmth. There's something in the detail. And I think
Yeah.
with art, in that same fashion,
Yeah.
the analog art style, there's something to that you
Yeah.
cannot mimic with some of the new strategies. And I think to some degree, maybe we need to scale back a little bit and
Listen,
go back to what we were doing before.
if I thought I could get away with it, I would probably tell all of my colorists to color like your shirt is colored.
Oh yes,
You
I
know,
love the classic.
It's not quite flat, but there's a color, and then there's a bit of a highlight. You know, simplify it. I think that too many comics today are overcolored.
I agree.
And it's like, look, I don't need all of that. It's a comic book, and I don't say that in a negative sense. It's like I don't need it to look like a film. I don't need it to look real. You know, I want it to be. I want Spider-Man to wear a red and blue costume.
Right.
You know, I don't want it to look like he could be a real person. He's not.
Right.
You know, and I'm okay with that. I understand that when I'm reading it, and I don't want him to be real. I want him to be red and blue.
That's what captivate. If it was anything like, if your experience when you started collecting was anything like mine's, what captivated me was the fiction. I know this isn't real, but man, I like the way this looks, and I wish I could jump into this page right now.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. You didn't. When it looks real, it's like, okay, well, this looks like the real world. This is not really why I come to comic books. I get it.
Right.
It's nice.
Yep.
And
I was just gonna say, I'm very fortunate in that I work with some super colorists, and they get me, and I think they're all on the same page as me, because they're like, yeah, we don't want to over render that. Which is over render is what they say. I just say over color.
Right.
You know, and so I like that they're on that same page, because it means we want the same thing. You know.
Right.
And so that makes me happy.
Makes the book good. Ken Lashley did, I think, was it X-Men Gold? This was probably 6 years ago. Yeah, I think it might have been X-Men Red. It was either X-Men Red or X-Men Blue. Can't remember which one. I got the book somewhere around. I collect so many books. Some of them I haven't even read yet. But Ken Lashley did, I want to say maybe 2 or 3 issues. And I can't remember who he had as his colorist, but they didn't oversaturate the page. And it there's something that happened when I read that book. I was like, wow.
Yeah.
What is this book is great. And I couldn't figure it out at first. I was like, why did I enjoy this book so much? And as I started looking through it, I was like, man, the colors are not overcomplicated.
Not muddy. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. I think we've, in the digital age, maybe we're doing a little too much.
Oh yeah. It's not unusual that when I see a page colored by someone, not generally on our team, but when I see a page colored by someone, my first comment is usually, it's too dark. It's too dark.
Right.
You know, lighten it up, you know, because the part of the problem is, and we actually had one of our covers recently. I looked at because part of the problem is you look at it on the screen, right? And you're like, ooh, because it's lit, right? There's a light behind. I mean, that's what your screen is. And so you look at it and you go, ooh, that looks so good. But the problem is you get the ink onto paper and it changes. It does not look the way it's going to look on your screen. And so you have to be aware of that. And unfortunately, I let one slip by. It's the only cover I can think of that we've done. We've done one that I look at and go,
missed the mark a little bit.
Yeah, I should have caught this and lightened this one up.
We'll allow you one.
Well, I'm not going to say which one it is. You have to figure that one out. Yeah,
we're gonna have to thumb through and find what that one is.
But see, here's the beauty of making independent comics is that we can actually go back and fix that. Now we have a stock. It's not a large stock, but we have a stock that we have that we'll go through and we can fix that so that when we print the second time, that color can be adjusted. That cover can be adjusted, and it's not something I'm ever going to go, oh, look, we did another cover.
Right.
I'm not going to say that. It's just hopefully it fixes it moving forward. And you couldn't do that at a place like, because Marvel and DC, you got these great big print runs. Well, our print runs aren't that big, right? We're very small print runs. So if we go through 200 books, well, guess what? I can fix it for the next 50 books,
How is that as an independent creator? How is it taking a comic book to print? Is that a daunting process? Because I've never seen like the process from nuts to bolts, and I would imagine that that's probably nerve-wracking slightly. Do you do like some test runs before you give the okay, like maybe 1 or 2 test runs?
I did, but I don't anymore.
Okay.
But yeah, it is very daunting because it's like, oh no, this is it, right? I've been making this comic and now it's about to become a real thing. I'm about to hold it, right? It's going to be real. And so, yeah, it is kind of a daunting, because, the other thing is that you're afraid that oh man, look how terrible this looks, right? You're afraid of that, or you're afraid of, oh crap, there's page 13, page 6, page 2. It's all out of order, right?
Oh no!
So you're afraid of all of those things, and so yeah, that is. But the more you do, the more comfortable you get. And like I said,
Right.
I don't get proof copies anymore because we've done them so much.
Roll with the punches.
And we've printed so many, and I'm like, okay, I know where we're at now. I know.
Okay.
Here's what my files need to look like. If my files don't look good, I can send them in. The other thing is that most of what we do is done by Kablam. And
okay, I was going to ask you that as well. I was going to ask you who does your printing.
They do the overwhelming majority of what we do. And on the occasion, and it has happened, the occasion I send them something bad, I get an email from them that says, hey, this file is bad, or this cover is the wrong size, or you have it looks like these 2 pages are swapped. Can you confirm or deny that? And so I'm like, oh crap, yeah, that is too small. I need it bigger.
Right.
And so that has happened a time or two, not a while, but when I first started working with them, and I was getting the proof copies, and that's when they would say, hey, here's what you messed up, dude, fix it.
Working those kinks out. I could definitely imagine how that would be. And I always wonder, maybe this is a little inside baseball. Do the big content houses print all of their stuff in the US? I've heard different stories. Somebody said they print stuff out of China. So I don't know.
So I honestly don't know where they print today because
Okay.
I'm not privy to that information. But I do know that when I worked there, most of what we had printed was in Canada.
Really?
So yeah,
that's interesting.
Yeah.
I would have never guessed Canada.
Yep. There was a I don't know what I think they're still around, but I don't know what they're called now. But it was Quebecor, which is basically Quebec something, right? But
okay.
Quebecor was
neighbors
Canadian.
to the north. Okay.
Yes. Yep. They printed the overwhelming majority, and there was a big printer down in. There were 2 others. There was Sparta, which I think was in Illinois, and there was, I think, World Color down in Nashville.
Okay.
But a lot of the stuff was printed out of Canada.
I
don't know where they print today.
Yeah, I've always had dreams. Like I said to myself, if I ever won the lotto, like some big lotto winnings, I would do something like go into printing for small, independent comic creators. Things like
that would be great.
Yeah, I don't draw anymore, and I don't write stories anymore like I used to, come up with stories in my head, jot some things down. But I would love to be of assistance to the comic community, which is kind of why my content on this page shifted. It started one way. I did a video about comic books. That video blew up, and I was like, all right, here we go. This is what we're doing.
And this is what I was going to say. I was going to say, you know what? You might not be writing the comics. You might not be drawing the comics, but you are creating content for that industry by doing this right here. You create content still. It's just it's just not the writing or the drawing.
Different facet,
it's just a different facet, and the industry needs it all. You know,
I enjoy this because I view a lot of the commentators online kind of like the Wizard magazine used to be.
Right.
We don't really have Wizard magazine anymore. They had a website for a while, and then that kind of, went by the wayside. But a lot of comic books I find out about now, if I'm not going to a convention and like meeting someone like you, it's really just being online. Somebody will mention something. I'm like, oh, I'm going to check that one out. This actually looks interesting.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah.
Same. Yeah.
I enjoy that. So I'm going to wrap this up.
Yeah.
And it was definitely enjoyable. I appreciate you giving me the time and allowing me to interview you and talk through some of this stuff. I hope you, the viewers, enjoy this conversation because I definitely did. And I want to thank you again for showing up and having this conversation. I really appreciate it. Anything you want to say to all my few viewers out there?
Well, no, well, first, thank you for even thinking of me. And I think, like I told you when you asked me, I said, you just have to be careful because I love to talk about comics.
Me too. As you can see, if I didn't have to go to sleep to get up for work, I'd keep talking.
Right? Oh, man. Yeah. I tell my wife, I said, I'm so ready to retire because I just want to do comics all the time now. So, so for anyone who happened to be watching and be interested in it, I would ask that you consider popping over to our Kickstarter. It's really easy to find. It's just www.silverlinecomicscrowdfunder.com, and that'll take you straight to it, where you can get a copy of this really awesome, sweet foil cover, as well as any number of back issues. Anything that you want to try, if you want to try Cat and Mouse that was talked about, that's a great way to do it. You can get a sweet foil cover that's going to be rare. And you can say at the same time, hey, I'm going to try out this Cat and Mouse, and you can try out a whole host of number ones as well to see if there's something you like. I would encourage anybody who likes comics to maybe give us a shot.
All right, when I upload the video, I'll put the links to your website and to that crowdfunding site as well, so people can go there and check it out. Thanks again. I definitely appreciate it.